Ahí está.
Yo nada más te veo a vos.
Creo que ya llegó el rabino y está grabando, sí.
Sí, ¿cómo estás?
Hi!
Hello.
Oh, you speak Spanish?
Sí.
Oh, nice. How are you, Rabbi?
How you doing, everyone?
Good. Baruch Hashem.
Shabbat
Shabbat tov.
Shabbat tov to you.
Hey,
Welcome,
what's up?
Uzi. What's up?
Hi.
Kakalaki.
Sí. Muy bien, sí.
All right. You look all refreshed. Good. See what happens. 2 weeks away from everybody. Oof, we get so much refreshments.
How's your week been, everybody? You had a good week?
Good. Good.
Busy?
Baruch Hashem. Good.
Hey, Donna.
Hi.
Wow, it's good to see you.
Hi, everybody, Michael.
Oh, welcome.
It's good to see you smiling there.
Good to see you. How you keeping? How's everything going?
Good. Yeah, I stepped out for a minute, and when I came back, y'all were here, and I was like, oh, everyone's in here.
You gotta mark the time zone for where you're at.
Okay, thanks.
Good to have you. I'm just gonna wait for everyone to come and join.
Yeah, thank you.
Get started.
I'm gonna mute my mic. Hold on. Oh, here you go. Oh, and I'm at work. So I'm taking my lunch break now, but I might have to leave a little bit early.
Sure, no problem.
Like 30 minutes. Yeah.
Sure.
Excuses. We know you don't like our class. It's okay.
Whatever. Whatever.
All right, let's see. I'm getting Christina. Kiko. I gotta get a lot of people.
Hi, Antoinette.
Hey, Chrissy. Hi, Darlene.
Hello.
Antoinette.
Hello.
Hi.
Hopefully you can't see me.
Nope, you're well hidden. Don't worry.
Thank goodness.
Right. Let's see. Get some other here. So no. The link we have again. I'm gonna mute my end. Rabbi's not gonna bite you. I'm sure he had his cholent fixed this weekend.
I had my cholent. All right, we're good to go. All right, so all right, okay. Whoever joins will come in a moment. Okay, so before we start, I just wanted to make today's class is going to be Le'ilu Nishmas, for the elevation of the soul of two people. That one is my grandmother, who's had an unveiling today. Her name is Rivka Bastov, and she passed away about under a year ago. And the other is for Amen.
May she also make an aliyah in Hashemayim as well. And all the things that she's taught you, friends, may bless you.
Amen. And the other is for the Le'ilu Nishmas of my friend who passed away last week. His name is David Michal Ben Yeshua. And just a fantastic person, someone that sorry about that.
He's back.
Okay, the internet's a little bit slow. So the other one is David Michal Ben Yeshua. All right, so we left off last time, and we're dealing with the 13 principles of faith. And today we're going to continue with principle number 7. I want to do 7, 8, and 9. And just a couple of interesting concepts that I want to touch upon to understand what it is. So for Dana, we're using this book. If you ever want to look it up. Okay, and the guys will share with you the link. So as I did previously, I'm going to read to you in Hebrew, and then I'll translate it for you. So the 7th principle says as follows. It says, Ani Mamen, I believe, be'emunah shalema, with complete faith, shenevuos Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, that the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, peace be on him, Hoysa Amitis, was the truth. For Shehu Hoya, he was, Av Nevi'im, the father of all prophets, Lekoidmin Lefanav, for those who came before him, Ula'abayim La'achayrav, and those who will come after him. Okay, now this principle of faith is basically an establishment of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, the one who received the Torah, he was the forerunner or the greatest prophet which ever lived. And there's been no prophet greater, not before Moses and not after Moses. So I want to explain a little bit more about what prophecy is, just so we understand why that's such an important concept, that Moses was the forerunner or the forebearer of prophecy. So to start off, maybe we'll take something more contemporary. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of something called astral projection or astral travel. Okay, so I want to look at that a little bit and understand something which is quite interesting. So in the group today, I sent out a note. I don't know if you heard it. Those crickets chirping. And when you slow it down, everyone doesn't get it. When you slow it down, it sounds like almost like a choir singing. Now, the concept, which is very interesting, is that everything is actually singing to Hashem all the time. So are we. We all have a song which we're singing to Hashem. And I think we either discussed it in class or in one of the side question. I don't remember where it was. But there's a concept that when a person sleeps, so we have 5 parts of the soul. The bottom part, the lowest part of the soul is called the nefesh. Above that we have the ruach, the spirit, and the neshama. And then we have above that, we have the chaya, yechida, and so on. There's 5 different elements. Now, when a person goes to sleep, so the nefesh component stays within a person, and the other 4 parts leave the person's body, and they're free to travel and roam around in a spiritual dimension. Now, what happens in prophecy? Prophecy is a way in which the soul connects to these upper dimensions and higher levels of existence. And it was in a scientific way, for something for us to understand. I want to work maybe backwards to connect the two. So there was someone by the name of Emmanuel Swedenborg, if I remember correctly. And he lived in, I think it was 1747. And he wrote something called a spiritual diary. And for the first time, it became kind of accepted that a person he had what you call a spiritual experience. He felt an outer body experience. When he went to sleep, while he was...
Can everyone please mute their microphones? Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, my internet's also a little slow. So he had this spiritual experience which he recorded, and he wrote it down in a spiritual diary. Now later on, there was someone by the name of Robert Monroe, and Robert Monroe set up an institute called the Monroe Foundation, the Monroe Institute. And Robert Monroe was his background was in audio production and audio, and he's a radio producer. And he discovered something interesting in himself, that there were different brainwaves. He studied brainwaves of what happens when a person's asleep. And he had a whole series of experiences that when he would sleep, he could feel his body, he could see his body. He was like out-of-body experience. And he was kind of the concept of out-of-body experience was kind of coined by him. He was the first one to come up with this concept. Now, this is not new in Torah and in Judaism, that when a person is more than just a physical body, now we have a soul. And it makes sense that when we have a body, that the soul can depart and the soul can separate and detach to certain degrees, and the soul can receive information in that way. So I'll tell you a story which happened to me myself. Now, I once had a dream, and it felt quite, there's another concept they call lucid dreaming. You can try it out for yourself at home. You know, if you ever go to sleep and you kind of awake and you realize that you are dreaming, you can kind of connect to that dream that you're having, and you experience something on a different level than you would normally. So in this particular dream which I had, I felt myself elevating or leaving my body, and I was sleeping, and I could look back down and I could see myself. It was a very peculiar experience. And then suddenly I was rushing, almost felt like I was rushing through space. And I was like, and I was just like flying and flying, going faster and faster and faster and faster. And I noticed that there was kind of like a silver cord which was connected between me and my body. Okay, so it was a very peculiar experience. I don't know if it was anything more than a dream, but when I looked into it, and I was quite curious, I was fascinated myself what that meant and the kinds of experiences that I had. So I did find that there were people that speak about astral projection and astral travel. That's actually how I came onto it from my own experience. I started researching it for myself. So, and they do speak about the silver cord, which I felt. So I've experienced this firsthand, that a person can separate during a dream state and leave their body behind. Now, that is all a natural process. There's nothing supernatural about that. Just how Hashem made the world, that when a person goes to sleep, different parts of their body can remain behind, and other parts, the higher, loftier parts of the soul, can travel and go elsewhere. Now, the concept of nevuah, of what a prophecy is a very similar sort of thing. Now, when the sages say that when a person's soul detaches from their body in that way, so the soul can experience a spiritual dimension and can receive information that's not normally known. And then when the soul comes back to the body can then give over that message. So that's what happens, for example, in a dream. So you may dream, for example, the Talmud says if a person dreams of a fruit, right? The fruit has a certain symbolism. What's actually going on is that the soul saw a particular message, and when the soul comes back to the body, it then wants to reveal that message which it saw in the spiritual dimension. Now, that can be fine-tuned to a greater and greater extent until the point where the body and the soul can work as a unit. So prophecy, for the most part, is the ability of the body to separate from the soul in such a way that the body can still remain alive, and the soul travels up and receives a message from Hashem. Now, there's a interesting thing which we found, and that is going along what we said earlier. There's a frequency in which the Earth resonates at. Okay, the Earth resonates at a frequency of I think 7.83 hertz is the frequency in which the world is tuned into. Now, this frequency's got a special name. It's called the Schumann frequency. And this is basically, we are almost receiving consciousness through this vibration. Now, what the Monroe Institute discovered was that different vibrations allow us to experience different levels of consciousness. Okay? Now, and there's different sorts of things. There's different rhythms and different ways that we can allow ourselves to experience. And we see that this was around even in the days in Egypt. They had different ways of getting a person onto different energy vibrations, and through that being able to experience different levels and different stages of consciousness. Now, a prophet would be a person who had been able to tune himself in and been able to receive a message from Hashem. Now, in the days of Samuel, Shmuel, Navi, we see that there were schools of prophecy where people would train themselves in the fields of how to receive prophecy, and they would make their bodies ready so that whenever Hashem was ready to talk to them, they would be able to receive prophecy. Now, when a prophet would receive prophecy, it was quite a traumatic experience. They would go through, as we discussed, I think last time, they would have almost something like an epileptic fit, and their body would convulse, and you can imagine their soul was they're almost dead, right? Receiving prophecy is almost like dying, but staying alive in the process. So it's a very, very intense and traumatic experience. During that stage, while a person is in that in-between life and death stage, so the soul is in a spiritual dimension, and it's receiving a message from God. Now, a regular prophet was not able to see God himself, right? There's a passage which says, Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. A person cannot see me and stay alive. The two become, it's too intense. To see God and to remain alive would be too powerful. So what normally happened was, a prophet would see a vision of Hashem. If you could imagine, Hashem would be standing telling over the message, and the prophet would see a vision, right, which would be almost like we would imagine, be like a mirror image. The prophet will look at the mirror and see God speaking in the mirror. Now that mirror is actually an angel, and that angel is called the Aspaklari. That is a kind of a conduit to receive the message from God. And that angel would be the way of how a message would get from Hashem to the prophet. And even that was very, very intense. To be able to see on such a high level and to experience a message directly from the creator of the universe would obviously be traumatic and intense as you can't imagine. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, he had a prophecy in a level which was incomparable to anybody else. Now, there's 4 different things in which Moses had, which other prophets didn't have. And there's even a verse we say in the Shabbos prayers, we say in the lead up to Shabbos, we say Moshe v'Aaron v'Shmuel, Moses, Aaron, and Samuel, Korin el Hashem, they would call out to God, v'hu yanem, and God would answer. Now, normally, a prophet would have to ready himself, and if God chose to speak to him, then he'll be able to receive prophecy. However, Moses, Aaron, and Samuel, they could choose when they could speak to Hashem. Whenever they wanted to, they could kind of tap into God and speak to God at will. So they had a level of prophecy higher than other prophets. Now, Moses was the highest prophet ever, and there's 4, the Rambam mentions 4 characteristics of 4 things which Moses had that others didn't. Now, for normally, a prophet would have to be in a trance, as we discussed, or asleep, in order to receive this prophecy. It means that you have to go through a process of separating his body from his soul. Now, Moses was always in a state of readiness that even when he was awake, right, and fully conscious, he was able to speak to God. So he could be speaking to you and then speaking to God, speaking to you, speaking to God. That was a very unique ability that Moses had, which other prophets didn't have, right? And that's why the verse says that Hashem says about Moses that I spoke to him face to face like a friend, because Moses was always in that state of being ready. And the other thing that Moses had, Moses would speak to God and would have no physical side effects. Moses was not traumatized with this experience of speaking one-on-one to God. And in fact, we find in the Torah, in Exodus, after the portion where it deals with the golden calf, that Moses actually had a study session where Moses and God would meet on a daily basis. So basically, God was not wanting to speak to the rest of the Jews, and Moses and God would meet on a day-to-day basis. So that was kind of, Moses was not affected by the intensity and would suffer no physical consequences from seeing and interacting with Hashem. Okay, the third thing which is brought is that Moses would receive prophecy, we mentioned a little bit earlier, when he chose to. Moses could say to God, what's the answer to this question? I need your help here. So Moses could initiate the conversation. For other prophets, they would wait, and sometimes we find that a prophet could train. We find in the days of Samuel, in the prophet schools, people would train to be a prophet, and they could wait a week, a month, a day, a year, and sometimes their whole lives would be just preparing their bodies to receive a prophecy, and yet never receive it. It was up to God to choose them whether he's going to send a message. Now, Moses was able to initiate conversation with God, unlike any of the other prophets. And the fourth thing is that Moses was able to see God directly, whereas all the other prophets needed to have this angel that would have this vision in between. Moses could see the prophecy directly. He could speak face to face with God. He didn't need any conduit in between. Now we see this elaborated more in the book of in Judges, where it speaks about how and also in the book of Cheskel, right, Cheskel the prophet, when God first reveals himself to Ezekiel the prophet, he asks him and says to him, "What do you see?" Right, and Ezekiel says back to God, "Right, I see a tree." Now, God asks him a series of questions, and he keeps on referring back. Now, what's going on? I don't know if you've ever been to like an optician. If you wear the glasses, right? The optician will say, "What's better, number one or number two? No, 2 or 3 or 4." It's so God was doing a similar sort of thing with Ezekiel, basically fine tuning to make sure that he's seeing the right message. And that was what Ezekiel was doing. And God gave a series of instructions to Ezekiel. He told him to go and eat dung. He told him to go and fast. He gave him a whole bunch of very weird and peculiar instructions. And the commentaries explain that the reason for that is, in order to be a vessel to receive prophecy, you need to kind of empty out all of your ego and all of yourself, and so that you're a completely empty receptacle, that you can receive the full bounty of Hashem. And basically, by eating dung, he basically had to get rid of any appetites that he had, fasting, and all natural desires which a normal person would have. He had to separate himself entirely from it until he could fine-tune his vision and be able to see Hashem. So that was what made Moses different. And the reason why that's so important is going to be what's going to come on next, and that is that because Moses was the greatest prophet, so whatever Moses saw was unlike any other prophet and was the strongest of all prophecies. Now, this is going to dovetail into the next one, and I'll take questions at the end. I'm just going to do 8 and 9, and I'm sure you have questions afterwards. So, principle 8 says as follows. It says, Ani ma'amin, I believe, be'emunah shelema, with complete faith, shekol ha'torah matzuya ata b'yadeinu, that all of the Torah which is found now in our hands, hi hanasuna leMoshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom. It is the Torah which was given to Moses, a peace be on him. Now that is a very important concept, and that is the Torah which we have today. If you go to a synagogue and you'll see that they take out the Torah, that Torah which we have today is the exact same wording and the exact same Torah as the Torah which Moses received from God. Not a word has been changed. There's been no alteration. Nothing. It's the exact same words. Now, just to elaborate on that a little bit, if you have, it's part of the Jewish law, if you have a Torah scroll and even one letter is missing, so that Torah scroll cannot be used. It's an invalid Torah, right? I don't know if you've ever seen it. They wrap up the Torah and they put a ribbon around it to show that it's invalid, and we don't read. We're not allowed to read from such a Torah. So if it's missing even one letter, it's no longer a valid Torah scroll. So the Torah scroll has been written, and there's a whole process of how we copy one text to another. One has to write from a Torah scroll. You can't write it by heart. You have to copy letter by letter. And the Torah which Moshe Rabbeinu received has remained intact with us for the last 3,300 and something years, and nothing has been changed. Now, the reason why the Torah is so fixed and hasn't been changed is due to the fact that Moses received it. Had it been any other prophet which had received the Torah except for Moses, the Torah may have had alterations. But because, and it links back to the previous principle, because Moses was unlike any other prophet, when God gave him the message, it was exact and perfect in how it was given. And that's part of that. So principle 7 and 8 are almost joined together. Because Moses was the ultimate prophet, the Torah which he received was complete in its entire format. Now, the sages say, it's the Talmud in Shabbos, which discusses this, which says that before Moses received the Torah, he went up into heaven and he ascended, right? And the angels said to God, "What's a man doing here? Now, how come there's a human being in this spiritual environment?" And Hashem says to the angels, "This is Moses, meet Moses. Now he's come to receive the Torah." Right? And the angels are very upset, and they all kind of bully around Moses, and they want to kill Moses. As they said, they started actually shouting at God, right? However that means, and they say, "You cannot give this Torah to a man. How can you do that? It's our book. This is for us. Right? How can you give the Torah, such a lofty thing, to a man? How can it be?" So God says to Moses, "Grab onto my throne," right? Because his life was in danger. Moses grabs onto God's throne, and Hashem says to Moses, "Tell them the answer. Tell the angels what I've taught you." So Moses says to the angels, in this Torah, it says their commandment that honor your mother and father, and Moses says to the angels, "Do you have a mother and father that you have to honor?" And the angels saying, "No, we don't have that." So Moses says, "That's not your Torah. It says in the Torah you should guard the Shabbos, right? And you should work for 6 days, and on the seventh day you should rest." And Moses says to the angels, "Do you work for 6 days and rest?" And the angels say, "No." Right? Another thing it goes through, Moses says, it says, "Do not steal." And the angels, Moses asked the angels, "Do you have any possessions that you can steal?" Right? So,
Can you just back up a little bit? You froze a second there. I know it was an important part that you were speaking on.
okay. All right, sure. So, okay, if you can hear me. So Moses basically was having an interaction between himself and then angels about what the Torah is all about. And Moses lists a series of commandments where the angels say it's not relevant to them, but it's relevant to human beings. So the angels soon realized that there's a certain relevance of the Torah which is relevant to human beings, but not relevant to angels. And what's important about that is that a lot of the commentaries explain, and they ask, what were the angels thinking? Had they never heard of do not kill? Have they never heard of do not steal? Have they never heard of, keep the Shabbos? What's Moses' new revelation that they'd never heard of it, that they needed Moses to come and explain? And surely they've obviously heard of that before. Right? What was going on that they needed someone to explain to them? So the Gemara over there, the Talmud says that 974 generations before the Torah was given to man, it was with God. Now, what that means is that for many, right, if you, Dominic, I think you got the new book, and Hannah, you have it, right? So in my other book, I explain how that actually makes the universe quite a very old place. I do the calculations over there of how old the universe actually is. But it's based on that particular verse or that particular phrase, the phraseology, that the universe was running and operating with the Torah, which was not the Torah as we know it today. Now, the wording and the lettering were exactly the same. Now, the Torah has every single letter, and if you want to think of it as a code. And every letter of the Aleph base has is one long code. This is basically the coding of the universe. And this was what was being used to operate the entire universe. And what Moses received was the exact same lettering that the angels had been using for thousands of years, but had never seen the Torah being broken up into these pieces. For example, we have the Torah begins with the word Bereshis, in the beginning. The angels just had the base, Resh, Shin. They didn't know. They may have had a base and a Resh, and they would not have had the breaking up of the letters. And that was the whole point of Moses learning the Torah from God, was that Moses sat with God, and God said to Moses, hey, put a comma here, put a space here. This is the end of a sentence. This is a new sentence. And when you divide these letters of the Torah, it forms a series of commandments and instructions and a story, right, about mankind. But that was never known to the...
Hey, Rabbi, go back to Bereshit when you were talking about the angels of Bereshit, please.
All right, so it's just starting up again. Okay. Can you guys... All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Bereshit.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so the concept which we were saying was the letters of the Torah are more than just a story and an instruction set for, or no, a user manual for man. It's a string of letters which can be broken up into multiple different ways. The sages say shivim panim laTorah. The Torah can actually be understood or broken up into 70 different ways. There's 70 different versions. These same letters can be understood on 70 different levels or 70 different dimensions. You may be familiar with it. There's something called the Bible Codes, a book which was written not so long ago, and there's even software where you can do it yourself, where you can take the letters of the Torah and put commas in different places, and you'll get to see how the very same letters, if broken up into different words, can make very different sentences. So what Moses received was actually the program, the installation, the background program, which runs and operates as the operating system for the universe. And that's what the Torah is. It wasn't just, as we think of it, as a scroll, a book of commandments. Moses received the operating system, the coding of how to make the universe. And that's what the sages say. It's Aramaic. I'll say it in Aramaic and I'll translate it. He says, Histako ba'oraisa. God looked at the Torah, or bara alma, and he created the universe, which means this was the coding which God used. God spoke out this particular series of letters, and by speaking out this series of letters, this is how the universe was made. And that's basically what Moses was doing, was showing the angels, hey angels, you've understood the code in this way. If you put the commas in a different sequence, you can recode it, and you have now an instruction manual for mankind. And that was something the angels had never seen before. And the commentaries explain further that once the angels saw that there was a new facet to the Torah which they had never been aware of, each angel went and gave a secret over to Moses about what their function is. So for example, it says that the angel of death said to Moses, my job, I was created to bring death into the world. And my secret is that if I ever smell the fragrance of kataris, of incense, I'm unable to kill a human being. I'm depowered, and I cannot kill anybody. If fragrance is burning, I lose my ability to act. Okay, so am I off again? Okay, so am I off? Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just back up a couple of about 20 words.
Like the punchline.
We can only try, hey? All right, so getting back, so basically the angel of death said to Moses that my job is to kill human beings, but if the incense, the kataris, if the incense is burning, I'm unable to kill anybody. I become ineffective. My ability to kill goes away. And we see that Moses did that in the story where the people had sinned in the desert, and God had sent out a plague. He sent out the angel of death to go and kill a whole bunch of Jews in the desert. And Moses says to his brother Aaron, go and light up some incense and run out to this direction. And Aaron goes, he runs out with the incense, and he actually meets the angel of death. Right? And the angel of death says, what are you doing here? Right? And he's holding his incense. And the angel of death says, I'm powerless. Move out the way. Get rid of that incense. I'm here to kill the people. And Aaron says, no, Moses told me, I've got to do this. This makes you powerless. And the angel of death says to Moses, who told you? And Moses, and Aaron says, Moses, my brother told me, right? And it was a very interesting sequence of events of how the angel of death and Moses have this relationship of knowing this information. Moses basically finds out a whole bunch of different secrets from every single angel, and this is where a lot of the oral tradition comes from. It was from that event of receiving of the Torah. So that is an important concept, that the Torah which we have today cannot be changed. It's not because it's just it's something which we shouldn't do, but more than that, it's the very code of how the universe was made. So if you can think of it, it's a very simple thing. I know, for example, when I was learning programming, JavaScript, I got very frustrated. Sometimes you can put a comma where you should have or a space or a line, and you can get very, very frustrated, because one space or one dash where you should have a comma, or one semicolon where it should be a colon, that can break a code, right? It just won't operate. And you can think of it in a very simple term. If you wrote in a website address, www, comma, instead of a dot, it's just not going to work, right? It's just not going to link. So the same thing is with the code, this program that Moses received, the operating code of the universe. If you have one letter that's different, it just won't work, right? So it's more than we can't change the Torah. The Torah has to be in this format, and that is the format in which Hashem gave it to Moses, and it's remained unchanged since then. And moving on to the last one, we'll end there. Right, the last principle that we're going to cover today is the 9th, which says as follows. So, Ani Mamin, I believe, Be'emunah Shalem, with complete faith, Shezoisa Torah, that this Torah, Lo Tieh Muchlefes, it will never be changed, V'lo Tieh Torah Acheres, and there will never be another Torah, Me'esa Baris Baruch Shemai, from God Himself. So the Torah which we have is the Torah, and there's never going to be a new Torah. Now, I've also written about this in the other book as well, about how we find a concept today, the Old Testament, New Testament, right? The Third Testament, is updated versions, right? Your updates need updating, So the concept of the Torah is that this was the final product, that this is the final, there's never going to be another version of the Torah, right? It's a final pack, right? There's no updates. There's never going to be another version or another kind of Torah which is going to ever replace it. Right? And that's one of the flaws of other religions which came afterwards, that tried to use the Torah as their basis, was to say that the Torah was outdated and it needed to be modified, and therefore we have to supplement it with new additions, right? And that's something which we don't believe, right? The Jewish faith is that no, the Torah is in its whole context. The Torah was given as one unit and one piece. This is the Torah, this is it. Now, obviously, the Torah and Judaism does change with time. And when we get maybe later on to the laws of electricity on Shabbos, you'll get to see how the Torah fits and adapts and molds and changes with times and different periods. Wow. But the actual words themselves remain constant. It never changes. And the way that I wrote in my book, I actually heard it from someone called Aryeh Leib Baron. He was a student of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. He gives us as an example that the Torah is like a prescription. You go to the doctor and you get a prescription, and this is the medicine which you need. Now the Torah, right, is that prescription. Right? It's never going to be changed. And if you try and add or take away from the Torah, you end up breaking the Torah. And you see that a lot of different movements and kinds of organization, things which cropped up over the years, which tried to alter the Torah, which said the Torah was outdated or antiquated and no longer relevant. A lot of these things actually ruined the very face of the Torah. So that's a fundamental belief that the Torah is what it is, and it's our job to fit into the Torah and not for the Torah to fit into us. Now, so I end off with a little story, which they say, the people of Kelm. There's a famous.
Oh,
have you ever heard of Kelm?
Yes.
Okay, it was a town that they made fun of. So they once had a competition of who can make the best Torah cover. Right? They call the Torah cover a mantel, right, in Yiddish. So they said who could make the best Torah cover for the Torah scroll. So they had a competition, and everyone, they're going to have 3 judges. We're going to have a panel, review, and people went home and this one got velvet and then silk, and they all went. A couple of weeks later, they all come back and they had 3, top contenders. And the judges sat down and they ruled out. They took a vote, and eventually, they came out. There was one winner. That's one beautiful Torah cover, which was made out of beautiful velvet. The embroidery was perfect, meticulous. Everything was 100% how it should be. Had real diamonds, carved out, like woven into the stitching. And they awarded that this Torah cover was going to be the winner of the competition. Now they gave a prize to the one who made it, and they had their Torah scroll. And when they tried to put the cover over the Torah, they found that it was a bit too tight, didn't fit. Right? They got their measurements a little bit wrong. So what did they do? Right? They decided they're going to, if we cut out the portions of Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha, the first 3 portions of the Torah, and we cut out at the end of the Torah the last 3 portions, then the scroll is going to be a bit more narrower. So that's what they did. Right? They cut out the beginning and they cut out a little bit at the end. And then when they rolled it close together, right, it formed a neat, much smaller volume, and then they could get the scroll over it. Right? So that's it. They got the cover over it like that. Now they say right, they use that as a mashal, right, as a parable, that it's up to us to fit into the Torah. It's not for the Torah to fit into us, which means we have to do what the Torah says. And it's up to us to understand what the Torah asks of us to do, and then to change and become that which Hashem expects for us. Now, it's not for us to say, this is what I want, and therefore the Torah must accommodate me. Right? We have to accommodate ourselves to the Torah and not the other way around. Now, if you're not ready for it, that's fine. You can be honest. You can say, I'm not ready for this. I can't, I'm not able to do something like that. Right? This is too much for me. Rather say that. Rather say, this is the Torah, and I can't do this yet. Right? This person, let's say, could say, the Torah says you must keep kosher, but I can't do it yet. Rather than saying that the Torah doesn't say you must keep kosher. Right? So rather say, the Torah says this, the Torah says I must do it, but I'm not yet able to do it. Or the Torah says I must keep Shabbos, but I'm not able to do it. So that's a more honest approach. Rather than saying that the Torah doesn't say that you have to keep Shabbos, rather admit what the Torah says, and then say that this is what the Torah is. I need to kind of become that which the Torah expects of me. And I think that's the honest approach that a person should take. And that brings us, I think, to the end. If you have any questions, you guys, you can unmute yourself. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has.
All right, anybody? Don't be shy. I know it's Sunday morning, Sunday night for some people.
What's the midrash that you talked about the angels sharing those secrets with Moshe?
So that's brought in the portion of Parshas Yisro, with and it's the midrash over there. So it's a midrash Tanchum, if I'm not mistaken. If you want,
Yeah.
there's the English translation, which has most of the midrash in it. There's a book called The Midrash Says, which is quite a useful book to get.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Sure.
Thank you. And I love all of the knowledge that you're teaching us. This is, it blows my mind sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, how Torah is for us. I mean, Hashem made it so that it's everything. I mean, if that makes sense. I mean, it
Yes.
fits into every single portion of our life,
Of course.
as long as we allow it to.
Yeah, that's actually what they say. You know, he's stuck over the fact that it's the programming code for the universe means that nothing can actually exist or falls outside of the spectrum of Torah. It's all there. There's nothing.
Yes.
Good. Anyone else?
I do think that there's a couple more questions there.
Yeah, sure.
Did you have a question, Hannah?
Yes.
Hannah, yes.
Hi. Just the idea about the Torah being complete and having everything in it and not changing. So you said something about electricity, for example, and I completely get that the words remain the same and the message is the same, but times move, etc. So this weekend I had an interesting situation. I didn't, for some reason, I never really realized that I have a movement sensor in our backyard. So it suddenly, I don't know what moved there. I think it was our neighbor's cat or something. And I had forgotten to put the kitchen light on. So maybe that's why I noticed it, because I was in the dark. And suddenly there was the light outside, and it occurred to me, so what happens if I walk out, if I had walked out and the light comes on and I'm not meant to create a light? So, and I really wondered to myself, so what's the, because I'm sure that's not written in the Torah.
Right.
But, and also just another quick question about the arguments then that various rabbis would have on how they interpret this or interpret that. So what's that about, given that the word is what it is and it shouldn't be changing? What are the perspectives all about?
Great. So it's a great question, and it brings us to a very important concept, which it says by the stages that Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chaim, which is in Hebrew. In English translates Elu va'elu, these and those. Divrei Elokim chaim are the words of the living God, which means that you can have two sages if they are devoted to God and studying the word of God. Even though they can have two divergent opinions, they're actually both true. Now, this is how we view. Sorry, my internet's a bit slow. This is how we view the relationship of an argument. That even if something appears to be argumentative, there's a relevance for the one to happen in one context. All right. Sorry about that. Can you hear me? Good. So just to go back to that concept, even when we find that there's an argument, there's a context in which one version applies and a context in which a different version applies. So when it comes to, for example, electricity on Shabbos, we don't have any verses. No, with the code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, was written in the 1500s. Now, at that time, electricity wasn't in use. So you're not going to actually find a chapter and verse which speaks about the relevance and the laws of electricity on Shabbos. So what has to be done is to derive it from existing principles and then to extrapolate from that. And we will, when we get to that topic, would understand a bit more how modern day laws work. And I personally believe You know, that, for example, like the fourth industrial revolution that we're going through now, is going to bring up a whole lot of very complex questions in the Torah world. For example, just something which I was experiencing, dealing with recently, was something like, like Amazon and Siri, and Google, where one can actually talk and interact with without having to do any physical work or having to physically move your hands. And that would fall under category of Amira La'akum, which is a category of Shabbos itself, and whether or not we're talking. And there's going to be a lot of such questions. Another one is the artificial womb. These are going to bring a lot of new questions, which are going to bring, even, for example, with the cloning of the sheep. When I was doing medical ethics courses, that was one of a very interesting question about what halachic status does a cloned animal have. We didn't have that, and had to be. It was a lot of divergent opinions.
Yeah.
So it's going to definitely. The Torah does shift with time, and you do find that there's different customs and laws which occur. But the essence is that the law remains what the law is. The question, how does that fit in? So yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
A question for the rabbi.
Yeah, sure.
I kind of was, when you were talking about Moshe holding on to the throne of Hashem, like,
Excuse me.
I was wondering if you could like add a few details to that, because I kind of got lost there.
Okay, so basically what happened was Moses ascended into the domain in which God resides together with his kind of most prominent angels. And in that space, man had never been before. There'd been kind of, call it a dimension, a spiritual dimension, which had never been occupied with the human soul. So when the angels saw that there's a human soul in this holy, holy, lofty space, it's almost like, what's a human being doing here? This is no place for a human to be. So the angels wanted to attack. They thought someone had kind of like broken in. If you would find a burglar in your house, you think like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. So that was the kind of the approach that the angels had towards Moses, that he didn't belong there. God obviously invited him to be there, so he was a welcome guest by God, and therefore God said, hold on to my throne. If you hold on to my throne, that means connect to me, and through your connection and personal relationship with me, you'll be able to overpower these very mighty angels. Right? Moses, just to give a little bit more detail, Moses says to God that just the breath of their nose can burn me up. Which means that they are so spiritual and so lofty that just even looking in their direction could be all-consuming. So that was
Thank you, Rabbi.
yeah. Okay, but you should have a look at the midrash. Pretty good.
So we have another question here, Rabbi.
Yeah.
It says, Very should be on camera to speak on camera. Could you answer this question for her daughter and her? They want to convert. So she asked, why is it that they were born Gentiles instead of being born Jews? I have an answer to it, but let's go ahead with yours.
So I think there's many answers. The question is, well, why was a person born at all? Never mind, why were they born into one place and one, why were you even born? So I think the answer is that Hashem put you into the world to do a very specific job, which you can only do in that frame that you were given, in the context that you were given. If you not experienced all those experiences in life, you would not have become the person who you are today. So Hashem specifically wanted you to be in that time, in that place, in that religion, to go through such a process, because all those steps in the journey are actually changing and making an impact on everyone else's life and on your own life. Which had you been born in any other way, you would never have reached that full potential. So it's almost just part. The journey is not is part of the goal. That's I think in short. But Uzi, if you would like to add more, happy to learn from you as well.
Okay. So there is another insight too, that a person who's not born Jewish, if you look at the prophet Isaiah, he says that, and this is a very strong one, and I hold to it to a lot of people, that when a person comes from the outside of Torah, not knowing anything of the God of Israel, learning the knowledge of who God of Israel is, and not only doing that, but learning the times, the holy feasts, the sacred times that the Jewish people would hold to, they hold to them a lot tighter and stronger. And basically, when they learn of the covenant, then they're willing to come in through conversion. And basically, what Hashem does, he makes that person a pillar in a form of a midrash, a temple, excuse me, and that person's held higher than the person who's born Jewish. Most people who are born Jewish actually don't hold to the same standard as someone who is about teshuva or a convert, because there's a deeper essence of love. And with that deeper essence of love, that's what Hashem wants. And that's when we're willing to give ourselves more truly to Hashem, to serve him with a more of a real essence, instead of just as born into it and given a costume, and not having a real heart to serve the Creator. Because at that point in time, if you think about it, you're born into something, you're not going to want to give your all to that. And Hashem, that's why he separates the differences. Some families may come from families of prestige, and their kids are, they're not where the parents want them to be. And Hashem has designed the system that way so that all of us can do it. And we're here to help each other. So I hope that answers your question.
Good. Thank you, Uzi. Good.
Hannah, you have another piggyback question? Only one question, Hannah.
Something just came up for me from what you both were saying, and it has to do with a question actually that comes up a lot for me. Is so there's all this zeal. It's been a long journey. Well, I'm talking about me personally, and I mean, I think in the last 2 years, I think the internet has really helped a lot in terms of making information available. Even the fact that I'm in this class has to do with just searching, being able to get something on the internet. And yet I ask myself, what's going to happen once conversion has happened? What happens to people typically? So is it going to be like, oh, I've arrived, and what does that mean? Or is it going to be more just opportunity to go deeper and to hear more clearly and to really live the purpose? I'm often wondering, it's been really hard, and I think it's one thing to say God put us here for a purpose, but it's also quite easy to give up, I think, because just the rejection and the not knowing can make one stray. But essentially I'm just wondering, so what happens? There's conversion, and then what?
So I'll share a little bit of insight from my own perspective, and it's something which I thought about myself, just of who I am as a person, and that the word convert is actually not, there isn't such a word in the Torah. Convert doesn't exist, such a word. The word for a person who's becoming Jewish is a ger, and ger actually means a stranger, person who's strange. And the truth is that we all feel like strangers, and becoming a convert, what that means is becoming familiar with yourself and becoming less of a stranger to yourself. And I consider myself to be a convert, or a ger at least, or a stranger, in that I'm continuously becoming more of myself and learning who I really am. So therefore I associate with it because I feel I'm in the exact same, I don't feel any different that I was born one way or another, because I'm in the exact same process. I'm always continuously learning. So I think the process of learning never really ends. It's you never get to a place, of where now I know everything about myself. You've got to always remember who you are and continuously unfold layers within yourself, and you always remain a stranger, and you go through this life being a stranger and not necessarily fitting in. and trying to become yourself and actually make peace with who you are, and allowing your natural expression to be, to be your true self. So that's the process, I think, which never ends. Whether you were born a Jew or you're born in whatever, any other way, I think it's an ongoing, process. And certainly for us, now I would want everyone to continue, and for only to grow stronger and stronger, in this process of people who have started the journey of finding themselves and have continued growing and finding more of themselves, right? So it's not to say I found a little bit, now I can stop. Once you first, like if you start a diamond mine, if you find a few diamonds, yeah, you don't quit. You keep on digging more, because that's a sign that there's a whole reservoir underneath. Right? So I think that's a process. It's a lifelong journey of discovering the jewels within inside of yourself.
If I may piggyback onto your response, as far as like my journey has gone, coming from an Augustine background, conversal background, it's not all the peaches, creams, lights, and bells and whistles that people make it seem like. It's this mystical world to become Jewish. You have to keep in mind that even when you go through the mikvah process, you're still going to have to go through so much. You're still going to be treated like a stranger, even amongst some of your own people. And that's something you have to be willing to accept as well, because not everyone's going to accept you. The only things that really should matter is if you accept yourself. If Hashem's already accepted you, and the people that are in your life, those people have accepted you. So it's a very humble walk, and that's something that we all have to accept. You're not going to go running through some parades and like everyone's going to be so super happy. You can have the people that are going to be happy for you, and those are the people that Hashem has placed in your life, in your community, and the people who are for you. Those people want to see you to grow and to elevate your soul, and to also continue to work on it. So, all right, I'm going to be quiet.
I have a question.
Thank you.
I have like a continuing question.
Yeah.
What if the identity thing about yourself and like how you relate to Jewish people, like to Israel, when will it become more concrete in the future? Like everyone feels a different way they came in, a Ger or a Gentile, or does it like go to an apex eventually, or like is it just going to be like parallel, or is it just we're gonna learn, like, I'm just jumping ahead, right?
So the truth is, I don't know if we know an exact thing. My own understanding is that what we say in the verse is, "Bayomahu," on that day, Hashem echad u'shmo echad. God will be one, and His name will be one, which is normally in reference either to the times of Mashiach or the times of the world to come, where the barriers or separations will be less important, and will be experiencing the world as purely spiritual beings, or the physical differences won't matter anymore. So I think it will reach an apex at some point where we're going to all merge, and you're either with God or you're against God. Those who are with God will be joined and connected, and those who are not with God will fall by the wayside. So I think all these different incarnations that we go through, and the different processes of life, are all just steps to help us to become closer to Hashem, to see, it may be tests to see how much do you want to connect, how much are you sincere, how much, that's...
I realize I asked that. Is that what I asked? For real?
Yeah, I think so, Chef. If there's more I can, yeah, you want to add to
I was
that?
thinking like I didn't want to say what I think I was told I am, because I don't know. I just thought maybe everybody is supposed to wait or something.
Okay, if you want, you can you have a more specific question, I'm happy you can send me a message and I can maybe give you a more complete answer.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
And
Michael, I had a comment.
Hi, Rabbi. I have a question. I've been trying 20 minutes to ask a question, and people already asked 3 and 4 questions. It's already pissing me off. I'm sorry. My question is, between the month of Tammuz and as there's an observation to commemorate the fall of the temple, there's some do's and don'ts in there that I'm unclear of, including fasting. Could you explain that?
All right. So there's 3 distinct periods. So they call this period the 3 weeks. So between the 17th of Tammuz until the 9th of Av, there's a 3-week period of mourning. It starts off with less intense rules, and as we get closer to the 9th of Av, the laws intensify. So essentially, there's a fast, a half-day fast on the 17th of Tammuz, which was last week, Sunday. It was pushed off. And then there's a 24-hour fast, which is going to be in 2 weeks from now, which is the 9th of Av, which is a 24-hour fast. And that was to commemorate the destruction of the temple itself.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And if you have any
Lisa
particular
has a comment
questions,
as well.
you can.
Hi, Michael. I was thinking that the word ger, I find a very derogatory term. And I think in terms of fitting, I don't think you ever fit.
I think you're right. I think 100%.
There he is.
Hi there. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. So you're saying that the word is derogatory, and I think I agree with you fully. It's not a Hebrew word. It's very much an English word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
So what would be a better word instead of ger?
A ger means a stranger.
Uh-huh.
It's usually referred to. The Torah links them up with puts them in a category: a ger, a stranger, a yasam,
Mm-hmm.
a orphan, and almana as a widow. They're usually grouped together, and the reason the Minchas Chinuch actually explains that the 3 are grouped together because these people don't have a support structure. Right, an orphan doesn't have parents that he can turn to that will look out for him. An orphan doesn't have anyone to look out for his back. Someone there watching over him. The widow doesn't have the husband who's looking out for her, and the ger, the stranger, has also no support structure. It doesn't have someone. They're coming into a foreign culture, a foreign situation where they don't have the necessary support structure. So the real concept of a ger is someone who's lacking social support. That's probably the most accurate definition.
Might I add that I read somewhere once that a ger, G-E-R, is also in a book on a page. It said that they were in ancient times. I don't know how old, but they were very close to the Jewish people back then. They were like the closest next to the Jewish people. They were there next to them, and they were like they were helpful, not antagonistic or anything.
Right. Yeah. So you'll find that there's actually 2 kinds of this, what they call a ger toshav and a ger tzedek. A ger toshav was what they call a righteous Gentile, or someone who accepted the 7 commandments, the Noachide commandments, and was actually there as understood the purpose of a Jew and would be there to support and help and facilitate the Jewish people. That was a ger toshav. They had a very special place. There's even special privileges of the ger toshav. And there's a Ger Tzedek, and that's someone who wants to do more than he's obligated and actually join the Jewish nation. Right? So that's, for example, Moses' father-in-law. He converted to become Jewish. His other children may not have converted all the way, but they definitely associated with the Jewish people. And we find later on in the book of Joshua that the descendants of Jethro helped the Jews, with regard to supplying them with the food and a whole bunch of different things. So, yeah.
Thank you. Also, sorry.
All right. It's okay. If you can't think of it now, you can always just.
No, I know what it is. I just can't get it out.
Okay. And remember, if you ever have a question, you can ask me privately as well. If you feel more comfortable. That's also fun. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Rabbi, for your class. See everyone again next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rosie.
Bye.
Sure. Have an excellent week, everyone.
Thank you.
You too. Blessings to everybody.
These are all welcome to hang out and chat if you want.
Okay. Yes.
Everybody.